Hey, what's up, guys? This is Country Central Podcast. We are back with myself, Brandon, Jack, and Ben. And we're talking about this episode about well-known artists that you would have never expected to have a co-write with. So an unusual co-write that they would have been with. We have a couple of songs that we're going to name right off the bat, but one of the most unusual co-writes that I thought, in my personal opinion, of the whole country music industry is Jana Kramer's "I Got the Boy." The co-write on this song, there were three co-writers on this. One of them was actually Jamie Lynn Spears, Britney Spears' sister. So I thought this was like really interesting when this first came out. This would have been Jamie's first and only to this date top 10 single on the country charts. But "I Got the Boy" was a follow-up to Jana Kramer's song, her massive hit, her massive 2012 hit. So this was a follow up to that. But she also had an EP out, Jamie did, on the country charts in 2013, and which was moderately successful. So I just want to see what you guys think about that, and any other co-writes that you guys thought were unusual or pretty interesting.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good, Jack. I feel like, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people would be surprised how many pop or quote unquote pop artists or whatnot have had a hand in country music and vice versa. I think more than we'd like to admit. I mean, it's a wide open space and people collaborate all over the place. Nashville in particular, but yeah, Jack. I mean, I'm so curious. There's so many songs that I know for myself as a songwriter, lover. I just love the writing of the songs. It's always cool to hear who kind of got their start as a songwriter for writing songs for big artists and vice versa.
No, definitely. I think one of the funniest parts about this topic, as I was thinking about it early on, was that like there's still kind of a stigma, even though like a lot of the walls are kind of breaking down in the radio format a little bit. There's a little bit of a bit of a stigma from the traditional side, where folks are like, this pop country music, like I don't listen to Thomas Rhett, I love Chris Stapleton, he's the real deal. And the funny thing about that is that like these folks are all friends. I mean, we had Dan Smyers from Dan and Shay on the podcast not too long ago, and he was like, "Yeah, me and Shay, we're about to go and give Cody Johnson an award because like we know him, we're all friends." And it's the funniest thing that like, in spite of like how much the traditional folks love to vilify the pop country purveyors, like in reality they're all friends, and country music is such a tight community in that way. And I don't think there's a song that really represents that better than Crash and Burn by Thomas Rhett. Poppiest of pop. I would say that it was probably like his first, like, I mean, he had like hits on his first album, but this was like what really started to like elevate him a little bit. He was probably a C artist before, and at this point, circa Tangled Up, I would say he's a B. And the lead single of that album was Crash and Burn, and that song was co-written by Chris Stapleton himself. I mean, gruff, gravelly Stapleton. He was probably only like a year removed from Traveler at this point. So we had Whiskey and You, we had Parachute, we had Tennessee Whiskey. These were all hits for him. But meanwhile, he's singing backup on this little pop song with like a whistle track and all of these things. And it's just like a perfect testament to the fact that country music is that communal. Anybody can do anything, and it's just fun that way.
I love that, Jack. I mean, it's so collaborative, and Chris Stapleton, dude, he's a classic lover, but he lets that be seen, and he represents that in his own music. Like people, I won't ever tell people how to listen or how to take music because that's just not what our place is. But dude, it's music. It serves so many different purposes for people, and for Chris Stapleton, it pays his damn bills. Number one, and number two, for his own artistic expression, that's where you get some of these like incredible deep cuts and huge singles from him. But at the same time, he's so talented. He can write pop songs. He writes songs for pop artists. I mean, he does collaborations with Justin Timberlake that were huge and probably helped him as well. You know, it helped even country fans or country radio that maybe stuck their nose up at times to him to be like, this guy's a huge artist. He's one of the biggest in our genre. We better start following him and playing his songs on radio. And obviously Thomas Rhett, he's another guy that I think is incredibly talented, and he's someone that has done the pop leaning stuff, some more country focused stuff, but he also has written songs for people like, you know, he's done the pop stuff for Florida Georgia Line, like Round Here. But focus on, you know, Chris Stapleton. another song that I just think is a quintessential country song for a lot of people that are younger and growing up was "You're a Man" by Josh Turner, and Chris Stapleton wrote that too. He's just written a lot of just these heavy hidden songs that have been huge for the format. And I don't know. I think it's just a testament to like I guess when some people said they got annoyed that he would get maybe album of the year all the time or entertainer of the year all the time. I don't know if he's ever won entertainer of the year, but album of the year he would win a ton for almost by default. But it's for good reason. I think the industry almost feels like they owe him, because this guy's been behind the scenes of some of the biggest stuff in the scene. And I mean, you got to respect him. So, I mean, Your Man by Josh Turner. You think it's Josh Turner's song. Obviously, he sings it. He recorded it because that quintessential, vocal that he has. But, man, that's a Chris Stapleton classic as well. So that's one I always remember, and love when I found that out.
Yeah, without a doubt. Another really interesting facet of this I wanted to talk about had to do with Miranda Lambert. And I don't think that she's necessarily known as a like songwriter because like there are some artists who like they're an artist, they do their own thing, but they also moonlight as a songwriter. Obviously, like the Hardys and the Wallens and Ernests and folks like that. And Miranda hasn't had like, especially early in her career, how like most artists they'll start out and like write a few big hits and then go out on their own. Like Miranda Lambert really didn't do that. I mean, it was hit album, hit album, hit album. But I want to touch on the fact that like in the last couple of years, like her name has kind of like popped up on more than a few like songwriting liner sheets. And in a way that like it really wasn't the case before. I mean, Morgan Wallen's Thoughts You Should Know, obviously. I mean, the song for his mom, she co-wrote that, and just random little deep cuts here and there. Falling Apart by Parker McCollum, she co-wrote that. And there was a song on John Party's Heartache Medication, and I don't remember which one it was. But I do think it's interesting, like how certain artists, chiefly her, like as they get older, they'll kind of like lean more into the parts of the craft that they love the most. I mean, maybe it's not being a performer so much as like writing here and there. And conversely, like some artists like Keith Urban, like they might have written early on, but really all they want to do is just like have fun and play guitar. So they'll just do that and they'll let somebody else write their songs for them. So this unexpected element of Miranda Lambert's artistry where she's not just writing for her own albums, she's like outsourcing cuts and it's really fun like that. I think it's definitely worth noting.
No, thank you for bringing that up, Jack, because sometimes it's hard for people to kind of wrap their heads around when like they look at maybe a song's liner notes and they see maybe like 5, 6, maybe 10 writers on it. But that's just the spirit of Nashville. Sometimes to his detriment, don't get me wrong. We've seen a lot of terrible songs that have like 10 writers on it, and there's no reason that should be the case. But that's not why. It's not bad because 10 people wrote on it. It's because maybe they went on a trip together and they're all friends, as you mentioned, and they're like, hey, we're going to write songs for multiple albums, multiple projects on this trip, but we're all different people together. And if an idea sticks or someone thinks of a line, that's credit. They all love to share credit in Nashville, their collaborative environment. And it's really cool to see a lot of these artists, like to your point, like Miranda Lambert, in kind of latter years of her career, being like, hey, like I think she just likes Morgan Wallen. She likes the dude. She probably wanted to hang out with him. Her and Nicole Gallion, who's written some of her biggest hits, and they just were probably just riffing about life, talking about life at the time, and they came right talking about family and mothers and whatnot. I think around Mother's Day, and then the floodgates open. I think that's the beauty of country music is that collaborative, the familial aspect of it, and I think fans need to. It's different genres. It's appreciated in a different way, but I love that about country music. If it has 10 writers, I'm okay with it as long as it's obviously quality. But that's normal in country.
Yeah, and also I just want to point out too, there's so many country artists that write so much of their material and either never develops into something or a different chapter of their life begins and they're like, hey, this song doesn't really fit me anymore, and it's passed over to somebody else. I know, Carly Pierce recently did this. She had a song that was going to go on 29, and it was called Song Still Gets Me. Kind of about how she would listen to the radio and a certain song would remind her of her past love. And, that song went over to Sarah Darling. And it's like, you see the communication between artists like, wow, like we loved this song. We loved writing this. And we're so happy that it has a home because some artists just go through different chapters of their lives and it no longer matches. Or that's one case too. Or some just never come off the ground at all. People start writing stuff and they're like, I think this person might be able to record this, and it just gets passed along the way. So it's really cool when something comes into fruition like that. And I like how that the terminology when they're like, yeah, we're glad it found its home, its proper owner. So just a little tidbit I wanted to add.
No, I'm with you completely, Brandon. I think that's why I think we all are so passionate as country fans, because we understand the fact that it's this community thing, and the best song wins. And honestly, right, songwriters, the only way they make money, for better or for worse, is if a song that's on an album of maybe 12 or double albums now becomes a single and gets that moment, becomes the number one song and sells millions of copies. That's the only way they get paid. So I'm always a supporter. Even some of the not so good songs, I'm like, I want people to win, because hopefully it gives them the spark to write even more and hopefully better songs in the future. One that I did want to touch upon was, and this guy, you may not hear him anymore on radio, but Eric Pasley. He had a hit a couple years back, Friday Night, but he wrote arguably Jake Owen's biggest hit, Barefoot Blue Jean Night. And he actually recently released his own kind of, Eric Pasley version of the number ones I've written, and he released his own version of it. But dude, when I think about that song, Barefoot Blue Jean Night by Jake Owen, I mean, it takes me back to so many great memories of like vacations in California, just being by the beach or anything like that. And it was such a special song for so many people. And it's always cool to be like someone like Eric Pasley that got him to kind of have his rest of his career come alive. And maybe he's not a number one hit maker anymore, but he has a career now because of that song. So I think when we see these kind of like surprise or out of the blue, writing credits that lead to number one hits, I'm like, it's always cool because it gives someone a spark to be creative, but also gives them like a lease on life in their career in a way, And I think that's all we want in Nashville. Is like, there's people, Brandon, you can, back it up. There's people we all support that we want to like be the biggest artists out there, and they may not get it for themselves as an artist, but if they write a damn good song, they have a shot of, making a living. You know what I mean? So I think that's a beautiful thing about Nashville.
There's an interesting phenomenon I wanted to talk about a little bit here. In the last couple of years, I preach a lot on this podcast about like the continuity in country music, how everyone's kind of just like coming together and gathering around, just making good songs together, regardless of like what scene they're coming from. But obviously, the Texas country scene is like a good bit smaller than Nashville. Like, it still has its audience. They have their own radio stations, their own charts, and those types of things. But it's definitely like set apart, and it's not as far reaching. It's obviously local. But something that I've noticed recently has been like there have been a number of like big Nashville hit makers who have like crossed over, and like their names have been popping up on the liner notes for a couple of like notable Texas country artists. And the first one I wanted to mention was Luke Combs, because he wrote A Cowboy Knows How for Flatland Cavalry. And I really do think that this is a fun testament to the fact that like Nashville is like taking notice with like, advocates like Cody Johnson and Parker McCollum, like making Texas cool to everybody. Like Nashville is taking notice of the fact that like there are little bands like Flatland Cavalry that are doing it so right and have such a fun niche about them. And I love the fact that like Luke Combs has like embraced these dudes as like kind of his little brothers in a way. Like they're going out on freaking stadium tours, and like they're playing these songs together. Like they hang out backstage and just chilling like that. And I do think that that's a very cool thing. The other thing that I noticed that definitely bodes well for just like what we have to expect from Co Wetzel was the fact that Ernest snuck in a little co-write on El Paso with Oklahoma Sun. And obviously, like, he's been teasing the country album that he's going to make when he turns 30. And we've been looking forward to that quite a bit. But the fact that like that gap is already kind of being bridged a little bit with Ernest, like the writer of all writers in Nashville right now, like coming in and doing these co-writes, like it really does like get me excited a little bit. Like, my gosh, if he's collabing with Ernest and he's all out there touring with Hardy already, like what's next? Like, who is he going to be working with? Is there going to be like a feature or something like that where, we get the rock and the country together? I mean, I just love where that's headed.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to take a second to like spotlight. Yeah, I mean, I feel like aside from Hardy, I know we always sing his praises, but Ernest, man, he's kind of the all-star in Nashville in my mind. Truly, like the guy's behind some of the biggest songs, but the fact that he can, like you said, sneak in on maybe a red dirt style country artists like Co Wetzel, and it sound completely authentic. That's amazing. And you can only imagine there's people like Randall King that moved to Nashville as well. and he still writes the stuff traditional, but who's to say Ernest can co-write with him and it still sound exactly the same, just with maybe some clever wordplay or maybe a little bit of that tiny pop sensibility thrown in there that makes it palatable for the masses. I think Ernest, that's his like gift, that he has a turn of phrase that he can make a song viable for a pop audience. I think that's like really his innate skill. And I really just think like aside from his own personal projects, like he needs to keep being a co-writer because number one, he makes a lot of money doing it. Number two, I want a lot of these artists to be bigger. You know what I mean? So I think Ernest is kind of that magic, little, mix you can add to some of these rights to really have the song take off.
And that's the thing too. I feel like years ago there were so many like hard boundaries on a lot of these artists that were like either in larger labels that would not collaborate with, like quote unquote the little guys, and doing air quotes. But I feel like there's so much versatility now, and I feel like there were just so many like years ago there were just so many like hard boundaries, and it was so hard for smaller artists to come up the way it is now. So it's definitely cool seeing that versatility and seeing that collaboration happen. One of the collaborations I wanted to bring up with you guys that we would have never expected either. We know Keith Urban has had a slew of hits over the years. Two of his hits, Better Life and Long Hot Summer, were actually co-written by Richard Marx. So I want to hear what you guys have to think about, artists that go into maybe like adult contemporary or like rock genres. But Richard Marx, for those who don't know him a whole lot or aren't really too familiar with his music, he has a couple of hits, including Right Here Waiting and Endless Summer Nights. Those are like a couple of his biggest hits. But I want to just hear what you guys have to think about.
I mean, Jack, you touched upon it. I mean, Keith is in like a state. I mean, that's early on in his career still when you think about it. But Keith is just a guy that has never shied away from being progressive. The guy's always been pop leaning, even when the songs were a little more stripped back and traditional with the instrumentation. But the guy just has a turn of he has a good control for, like I said, like not unlike Ernest, the pop sensibility thing, and he kind of taken it to an extreme lately. But he loves collaborations, and I think he's somebody that champions others as well, which I love about Keith Urban. So he's always going to be someone to say, "Hey, I just love making music. I don't care if I'm the one toiling." It's not so much like I don't want to work. It's about I just want to keep releasing as much music as possible, exploring every avenue. And I will champion any writer that says, hey, this song's right for you if it speaks to him. And I think just any song with maybe adult contemporary or some sort of pop leaning sensibility to it, Keith Urban's going to welcome it. And even for some albums later in the cycle, I mean, he's done like Julia Michaels collaborations. He's done some interesting collaborations, to say the least. I don't know. For me as a fan, like I don't necessarily need Keith to release new music nowadays, but I liked some of his like pop leaning stuff. Even Graffiti You, which I know, Jack, not your favorite, man, it's still like there's certain like maybe just before TikTok, but like there's a song on there that like a little aside like called Texas Time. Obviously I'm from Texas, but like that song's not like a great country song, but man, like dude, if there's ever TikTok song, like that's a TikTok song before TikTok existed. And like he just seemed to be ahead of the curve with some of these things that didn't hit well for the country audience when he released them, but damn, for just the general public, man, you play some of these songs like from some of those interesting albums, and you'd be surprised how much you could connect with a wider audience. So I just think Keith is someone you should always respect as a country fan, because regardless of whether you like his music or not anymore, he's always been progressive, always been pushing the boundaries.
Yeah, for sure. And I want to double back to what Brandon mentioned initially. Like, as far as like Keith's upbeat singles, like, the jams, the fun ones, I'm taking like You'll Think of Me out of this. I don't know that he has like two better singles than Better Life and Long Hot Summer. Like, those songs are just like bangers upon bangers for sure. And the point about like pop artists like coming over and like, silently writing a couple of songs here and there in country music is very interesting, because I know we had like this little moment in 2017 where like pop features were just like everywhere in country music, like all over the place. But I do want to mention like one artist whose name has popped up in country music quite a bit over the last few years. I do want to pose this question to y'all. Does Ed Sheeran have a good country co-write like anywhere in his catalog? And this is somebody that I like quite a bit. But Parallel Line by Keith Urban, like Sappy as Crap. We have Tip of My Tongue by Kenny Chesney. If you've listened to like some of the early episodes of this podcast, you know my feelings on that song. the best country song ever made, quote unquote. Um, and a couple of others. I mean, he doesn't really have any like interesting, meaningful contributions to the genre as much as he seems to play in it.
He has it in him. He needs to write Morgan Wallen. I'm telling you, him and Wallen write together. It's the only way it will work because for Keith at this stage of his career, we've heard boring, sappy Keith already done 100 times better. Why would you? Parallel Line is a good song in my opinion, but it's just like it's not new, right? Tip of my tongue for Kenny, same thing. I mean, Kenny has done those kind of songs better before. I just think Morgan Wallen, that's where I think that's his sweet spot. I mean, I love upbeat stuff, but man, the ballads that he's been getting into, that's really what we've seen take off with fans, like across genres, across freaking gender, whatever you want to say. Like his ballads that he writes are the ones that take off the most. And I think if you connect with arguably the biggest pop songwriter artists out there, they could really create some magic. So I'm going to have some hope, hold out hope for our guy Ed Sheeran that he's not blocked out or boxed out of the country music world. But I think y'all should give Morgan Wallen a call, and you'd be surprised what you're able to cook up.
I'm kind of with you on that, Ben, because Ed co-wrote a song on Kelsey Ballerini's album Kelsey, called "Love and Hate." In my personal opinion, I thought it was like an okay song. I wasn't too crazy about it, and then I was kind of thinking, was this kind of just thrown in just to be like, hey, like we collaborated, like we have a song that we co-wrote together, and it was just kind of like thrown into the album. Like I questioned that a little because of the people who are credited on that Kelsey album, because she had a lot of pop influences on this album. We had Halsey on the record. We had influences from Taylor Parks. For those who don't know, she's written a slew of hits for a bunch of pop artists. We had Ian Kirkpatrick on. He's really been doing a lot of stuff with a ton of pop artists too. Britney Spears, Backstreet Boys, Jason Derulo. Like, I mean, the list goes on and on. So I'm like, was this collaboration really necessary to do, or was this kind of just thrown on there? But not my favorite song on the album. But I agree with you, Ben. I think that if he were to collaborate with people, maybe like Morgan, I think they could really sit down, and I think they could make a lot of magic together. I think they could come out with some quality material.
See, this is the issue for me though, and I know obviously this is a country podcast, so I won't venture too much into like the psyche of Ed Sheeran necessarily. But my feeling here is that Ed Sheeran excels as a songwriter almost exclusively when he's writing about himself, when he's writing about his own experiences, like things he's lived, the way he sees like his life right now with songs like Eraser or Take It Back or things like that, and Go Deep. I'm a big Ed Sheeran guy, so I mean, I'm not dogging on him just because he's a pop artist or anything like that. But I think that maybe if he did like sit down with Morgan and they like, were having this heart to heart about like some shared experience of theirs. I mean, they've both gone through alcoholism and stuff like that. Like if there was like a commonality for them to bond around, that might be kind of cool. But my issue is like most of his co-writes, it really does feel like he's just writing about nothing. Tip of my tongue is like the archetype of that, really. So I mean, that's really where my issue is. I mean, the songs that he writes in country music just feel like bland pop songs. He brings a lot to the table when it comes to like perspective and just a unique voice. I feel like if he utilized that more, if he felt strongly about being a country writer, he could. And he loves good country songwriting. Like he sang freaking When It Rains It Pours on Instagram. Like it's super fun.
Yeah, the last little like sidebar with pop I'd like to mention is I was just thinking about Julia Michaels, Jack, because she's collaborated a lot with Morgan Wallen and Diplo, obviously. But the one collaboration that comes to mind that kind of spotlights the issue with her and Ed Sheeran is "Cool Anymore" with Jordan Davis, which honestly I really like the song, but it does kind of it's just there, right? It's just there. It's like a good song, but it's just like we Jackie and I joke sometimes. Adult contemporary is kind of where people in their twilight years go, when their careers kind of losing steam in their normal format. And that's a really nice, pleasant song, but there's something about when these pop artists, right, these country folks that like they just I don't know if they're comfortable or they don't want to take a risk. I don't know. Like if it's a risk that's too popping, obviously fans won't like it, but the song is just there. Same thing like tip of my tongue. It's like about nothing. Cool Anymore is just obviously I love you and I don't care. I just want to be with you. It's just there. I still listen to it today, but it will never have the impact that they assume when they're like, I'm walking in the room with this amazing pop artist writer that's incredible, number ones, but they write the songs, and the songs are just like, dude, anyone could have written that song. You're better off like writing about with a country writer, otherwise. So it's always interesting to see like why those haven't hit as big as you would assume. And I think Maren Morris has a couple of Julia Michaels cuts on her current album, and I don't know, it hasn't really done as well as they would have liked. So it's very interesting.
I'm curious what you guys think. Like, do you think it's the writing, or do you think it's the production? Because I think a lot of it has to do with production. Like, I think if mediocre collaborations happen with writing the lyrics and collaborating together, do you think that a banging production could kind of override that? Or I'm curious to think what you guys what you guys think about that, because I think the production, if possible, could probably override that and make it a more lasting hit.
Yeah, this is my issue really. If we're talking about the pop thing specifically, I think country music, I mean, what's unique about it largely is that there's always a sense of place. Like we're talking about like a small town or a particular experience. We're not just talking about just love broadly or anything like that. We're talking about like a thing somebody's experience. I mean, I remember when Brantley Gilbert put out Same Old Song and he's like, people upset about us talking about like circling up the trucks and drinking a lot, but that's the life I know. That's what I'm writing about. I'm writing about what I know and what I feel. And that's not usually a thing that happens in pop music, right? I mean, the songs aren't I mean, exceptions can be made, but the songs aren't always about like one person's feelings and things like that. So when you do have a pop writer like come over to like mix it up a little bit, it doesn't always land because it's not on brand with what country music is traditionally all about.
On the topic of production, though, and the last thing I'll mention about it is the fact that Dan Smyers, Jack, you did kind of bring this up to us, where kind of country has gotten it, fallen in love with this, like the idea of the track guy, just the way they produce, the way they make demos, like they're able to make their whole songs. Like they don't necessarily always start off their songs anymore with just an acoustic guitar. They're literally on their computer, and they can. I mean, with Pro Tools and GarageBand, you can literally make the song already just with a few clicks of the button, like the skeleton of the song. And they fall in love with the fact that, damn, that song sounds killer. Like this song would hit so well live with the audience, and I just gotta sing over it. If I'm a talented singer, just gotta sing a good lyric over it, that they kind of forget to get deep into. Man, sometimes you're plucking guitar, you think about a certain time in your life, and you just lines will come out, not unlike what Zach Bryan became famous for. And I think a lot of country artists have gotten away from that. And I won't blame it because they collaborate with pop artists, but they definitely were inspired by the way pop and hip hop were able to churn out these singles so damn quickly. And the album cycles are very quick, but they had such huge success that country's like, why don't we do this too? So I think it's a big point to bring up, the fact that track guys are important, and they're very talented, but at the same time, it can get the artists away from, hey, three chords and the truth on guitar. That's what really matters. Can I really just, what am I feeling in this moment, and what can I kind of get out of these couple of strings? You know what I mean? So I think that has to do with it. And it's unfortunate these pop stars haven't really translated as well, but I'm okay with it because if it helps them write better songs, then we're all beneficiaries of it.
Without a doubt, yeah. As always, y'all, we want to thank you so much for hanging with us. We will catch you with another episode next week. Until then, check us out at Country Central on Instagram for all the single reviews, the hot takes, the news, all that good stuff. You can hit up countrycentralshop.com for the camo cap. And, like I said, we will catch you again with another episode real soon.